Hi, I want to welcome you to the Pattie Sadler Show, and thank you for joining us. Today we have a special guest, George Miller from GNS Consulting. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks
It's such a pleasure to have you here. First of all, why don't you tell us who GNS Consulting is?
Yes, GNS Consulting, it wasn't actually on my radar to be a consultant. I was teaching courses for a community college, and under the auspices of a grant, I had to create some workshops for the students, and they were open source workshops, and then I had to have the material vetted by our industry partners to make sure it was real and relevant and had a degree of rigor that was applicable to industry. And in the process of doing that and vetting the material, industry partners said, could you teach this to our employees? So I went back to the college and I told them that our industry partners would like me to teach this there. And at that time, there wasn't a venue in place to do that, but they said it's open source material. You can do whatever you want with it.
That's
so
exciting.
It was great. So I went back to the industry partners and I let them know I'd have to open my own consulting company and put together some contracts. And they said, go ahead and do that. And so I put the contracts together. And ever since then, I've been teaching the material. And there was 5 core workshops that I used to teach. And now we're up to 15. And
Wow.
the two that I'm talking with you today about is, now this wasn't created at the college. This was something that came afterwards. But I was teaching resume building and interview workshops at the college. And I created a workshop, How to Get a Job in 90 Minutes. And that has become one of the most successful workshops that GNS Consulting is offering today. The other workshop that I created after the grant was Reaching Your Fullest Potential by Shifting Your Paradigm. And when I discovered that was, I had a student and she was failing out on everything.
Oh.
And so I asked her, why is it that you're failing everything? You communicate fine. I see you with your peers. There's no noticeable deficits. Why is it that you're failing? And she said, you know what? I was a bad student in high school. I got pregnant at 16 and I dropped out. And I was just a bad student. I'm not a good student. And at that point I realized I couldn't help her be successful until she viewed herself differently.
Because there's no such thing as a bad person. There's no such thing as a bad student.
No.
It's just how we view ourselves. Is that right?
Yes. And so what I told her, I said, do me a favor. We have 3 weeks left. I want you to apply yourself for the next 3 weeks. And if you apply yourself, and I'm going to help you where I can, and you still fail, then yes, you know, this isn't for you. We'll find a venue that is for you. But what ended up happening is she applied herself for that 3 weeks, and she passed the program, and she passed the state boards. And what happened is you could see the light came on, and she got it, and she shifted her paradigm. She changed the way she viewed herself, and then the world changed the way they viewed her, and she got that. And I go back to the elephant story. When they're training an elephant, they take this big chain, and they chain the elephant to a post when it's a baby. And the elephant spends months and months trying to break free. And it never does. And as the elephant grows older, it stops fighting. And they can chain a full-grown elephant with a little chain to a post, and it will never fight to break free because it remembers that it couldn't do that. What it doesn't know is the situation's changed and the paradigm's changed. And that elephant has the strength now to break free. And that's the same thing with human beings. And actually, I think it was Kaiser did a research project called ACEs on adverse childhood experiences. And what happens is we bring that baggage with us to adulthood. And although the paradigm's changed, if we don't know it, we're still trapped by the shortcomings that we had early in life. And that was the case for her, and that's the case for a lot of us. We have to overcome the situations from the past.
So it comes down to our belief system. It comes down to what we believe about ourselves, and it can be. You can teach old dogs new tricks, right?
Yes. Yes.
So tell me a little bit more about your How to Get a Job in 90 Minutes.
Yes, we teach interview techniques that some are common in master's programs, and so people that have been through master programs will have seen these before. And then there's others that are organic and unique to our program. And I'll just give you one little tidbit. We teach the students to tell their story. And that's critical because the competition is extremely fierce out there. And you have to find a way to stand out. And sometimes you're competing against 30, 40, 50 people for the same position. And you have to figure out how to separate yourself from the herd. And telling your story is a great way to do that. And one of the reasons why is we've communicated before the print and word, before word was in print, we all communicated in tribes through stories. And that's how we passed on our legacies. And people remember stories. So we teach the students to tell their stories. And I use this tool when I teach classes. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Students forget a lot of times the difference between empathy and sympathy. And that's one of the test questions in medical programs. And so I had a student, they said, if I share this story with the class, they will never forget the difference again. So I said, okay, come on up. And he shares the story. And sympathy is when you feel sorry for somebody, and oftentimes you're thankful you're not them.
Yes.
But empathy means to see through the eyes of another. So he shares this story. There's a father and son, and they're walking through the mall. And they're on their way to the pet store to get the little boy a puppy. And the father gets there and he tells the merchant, we're here to get my son a puppy. And the merchant goes, you picked the best store in town. I just got in a new shipment of puppies. So the merchant escorts the father and son to the back of the store, and there's this pin filled with all these puppies. And the merchant tells the little boy, step on into the pin and pick out a puppy. So the little boy climbs into the pin, and there's puppies jumping all over him. And the merchant says, pick out a puppy. And before he picks one out of the corner of his eye, he sees a cage. And he says, what about that puppy in the cage? And the merchant goes, you don't want that puppy. That puppy's hips were broken during birth, and that puppy can't run and play with you like a normal puppy. And the little boy, he climbs out of the pen, and he walks over and he bends down to the cage, and he tells his father, I want this puppy. And the merchant looks at the father, and the father nods his head. The merchant says, okay. So he takes the puppy out, and he hands it to the father, and they're walking to the counter, and the merchant can't help himself. He turns around, he looks at the little boy, and he goes, out of all those puppies, why did you want that puppy? And the little boy lifts up his pant legs to show his braces and goes, because I know how that puppy feels. And that's the impact of a story. And I'll have students that they'll forget half the material they learned from me, but 4 or 5 years later, they'll be, you told the puppy story.
Yes.
And that's the impact of story. And we teach the students in our programs to tell your story when you're in that interview. And I had one young lady, she did a phenomenal job. She gets in there and she says, look, because at the end of every interview, they always ask, do you have any questions for us? And she did a decent job in her interview. But at the end of the interview, she said, this isn't really a question, this is more a statement. I was in the lobby and I saw my competition. And I know there's people out there more experienced and more qualified than I am for this position. But let me share something with you. Most of those people came from LA, San Francisco, Sacramento. I live here in the Central Valley. My grandparents raised my parents in the Central Valley. My parents raised me in the Central Valley. I'm raising my children here in the Central Valley. Now, if you hire me, I will stay here till I retire. A lot of those people, if they get opportunities to go back home, they probably will. But this is my home. So I will stay here and do the best possible job I can for you. And she got that position because she told her story. And everybody has a story, regardless of who you are. You have a reason why you're there and why you're applying.
I think that's really important for people to remember, is we all have a story. Everyone's story matters. And everyone is significant. And so when they share a story and they're attempting or working to get a job, it makes it more personable. Is that right?
Yes. Because, and I've sat on hiring boards in the past. And even for the people that are hiring, when you have 50 candidates in a lobby, it can be pretty, monotonous. But every so often you'll get a candidate that comes in and they will stand out. And a lot of times it's because of that.
Because of this program. Okay, well, George Miller, how do we get a hold of you?
Yes, my phone number is 559-309-0787, and my email is geochess@att.net.
I think it's real important for you to know that on Friday, February 27th at 3 p.m. in the Hanford Civic Auditorium, he will be teaching his course, How to Get a Job in 90 Minutes. Contact George Miller. He's got a great program. He's got the tools to put in your tool belt to give you the confidence and the ability to get a job. And I want to thank you for being on the show. Thank you so much for being here,
thank you
George.
for having me.
I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.